Hello and welcome back to the 84th episode of Dynamic Digital World. My name is Luke and we are back with our second episode since I've returned from hiatus. Today, Qualcomm is trying to buy Intel, Nintendo is suing the developers of Palworld, Cards Against Humanity has sued Elon Musk, and Wear OS watches might have an advantage over the Apple Watch thanks to Apple infringing on a patent. So those are our main story today. Let's start off with Qualcomm buying Intel because this might change the entire fabric of how computing works. So I'm going to do a small backstory just for those that are unaware. Traditionally, in the PC space, there have been two main competitors for people that make the processors that run your laptop and your desktop computer. Those are Intel and AMD. They run on an architecture called x86. Now, this architecture has been around for years. It's kind of a standard one. It's been here since forever ago, almost, honestly. But Qualcomm is another company that does make chips, but they make a different kind of chip. They make what's called ARM processors. Those are the ones that you'll typically find in your phone or nowadays in a Apple Mac computer, MacBook, Mac Mini, those iMacs, those devices, as well as, of course, in any phone that you buy, basically. So, recently Qualcomm branched out of making phone chips that were decently powered to making computer chips that were decently powered. Now, I say making chips that were decently powered because Qualcomm's been making desktop chips for a long time now, but realistically, they've only reached a high level of performance earlier this year in terms of the chips they were releasing with the new Snapdragon X platform. Now, Qualcomm is a massive company, right? I don't think some people realize quite how big Qualcomm is. They're not just this small company. Their chips can be found everywhere. So if you think about how many smartphones there are, you will find some piece of Qualcomm technology in almost every smartphone you buy. And that's why this is such a big deal. Because Qualcomm and Intel recently began competing on a scale that just was massive. But due to recent issues going on with Intel, they've got a very big issue going on where they've had to downsize their workforce by 15+%, and they've also reported a $1.6 billion loss. This is one of their weakest positions in a while, and they're still profitable at the minute, but there is a risk that they will not be profitable soon. So, on Friday, a report from the New York Times came out saying Qualcomm has not yet made an official offer to buy Intel, but that they are in the stages of discussing this. Now, the reason I'm actually reporting on this is not because normally I would actually wait a bit longer to see if this came out, but this is probably, if this happened, it would be the biggest shake-up in computing in decades. So, just a quick rundown of what Intel have been going through recently. So, as I say, they've had a $1.6 billion loss. So, in August, the CEO, Pat Gelsinger, he said they would stop all non-essential work. Now, that means that they are basically cutting back on anything that they can. And they've previously said that their chip-making business, what you call a fabrication business, is a big strength over AMD and other chip makers that rely on TSMC. But they are now spinning that off. So they are making that a separate division, separate from Intel. And Intel is actually relying on TSMC to produce their most cutting-edge chips. due to their manufacturing efforts not being great. So AMD has had hard times. They've also clawed back. They're also back now. Like, don't forget that Xbox uses an AMD chip. PlayStation uses an AMD chip. Now, so AMD, they had some troubles recently. No one's denying that. Just a few years ago, it looked like they could be leaving the race for making chips for desktop PCs. But then AMD came up with the Ryzen architecture. That blew Intel out of the water. No one was really expecting AMD to get back into that high level that they have. And now that they're there, Intel are having to try very hard to keep up and come back. And they're starting to try and get there, but it's not working at the minute anymore. It's just, they're just not getting there. AMD, Qualcomm, and Apple are technically smaller players than Intel, but Intel has had to make major changes to how they do everything in response to each of the new threats proposed by Apple, proposed by AMD, and now proposed by Qualcomm. And Intel haven't been preparing for these, and their business is not diversified. Their business is very much consolidated in PCs. They have a small amount of space in AI server chips, but there isn't even as big as AMD's, and Nvidia just dominates the AI server field. So this all leads to Intel being in a very low position and then being in trouble. That trouble also means that Qualcomm have a good opportunity here to step in and grab Intel if Intel shareholders go for a deal. Now, they are in very early discussions and the deal is far from certain, but if these are even being discussed, there is a chance of it, and this could lead to a big shake-up. I will bring you all of the news as it happens, as it comes out, and we will see where this goes. But for now, I think we should be bracing for a tsunami of change, assuming this goes through, as it could also change the way that your everyday desktop computer works. Now, let's go on something a little bit more funny, but also kind of sad. It's just kind of funny. So, there's a card game called Cards Against Humanity. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it's a very interesting card game, let's say. However, they have now sued SpaceX for trespassing on their property. Now, is this tech news? Not really, but SpaceX is like a massive tech company, and they've also just said that they're going to send like 5 new Starship rockets to Mars in the next 2 years that are uncrewed, which is kind of awesome. But SpaceX have apparently just dumped a load of their stuff onto property owned by Cards Against Humanity. And the only reason I mention this is just kind of how absurd it is, really. Like, it sounds so absurd, but because basically, Cards Against Humanity brought a plot in 2017 as part of a stunt. If you want to find out more about it, go take a look on Twitter. I will not be saying why on here. But according to them, SpaceX is basically building on their property, and it's kind of annoying them. So they've filed suit. They filed suit in Cameron County, 404th District Court in Texas. This is actually not venue shopping. This is exactly where the damages have occurred. With legislation we've seen recently, such as some legislation filed by Elon Musk, which we will actually talk about in a little bit. Generally, what some people have done is they do what's called venue shopping. So they look for a district with a favourable judge. This is just filed in the area it's happened, and that's that. So, yeah, that's also interesting. Now, let's talk about this kind of irony, because I mean, in my opinion, this is just kind of karma coming to Apple here. So, third topic, uh, Wear OS watches with blood oxygen might be better than Apple Watch, which does not have blood oxygen, at least in the US. Um, so there's a company called Masimo. They are a medical device maker, and their devices are basically made, at least their biggest kind of one that everyone knows about, is their blood oxygen features. Now, Masimo is the company that sued Apple, I want to say it was earlier this year, um, basically about how they are using their blood oxygen sensors that Apple technically stole a patent from Masimo for, and Apple was forced to disable the blood oxygen feature on all Apple Watches until they either license it from Masimo or if they manage to win the patent lawsuit. However, Masimo, the company, is now working with Google and Qualcomm to bring this same technology to Wear OS watches. Now, this is kind of incredible when you think about it, because this is exactly what Apple could have done. Like, when first told about this, because when Apple were first told, they were given a period of time to work with them, and they refused. So, it's good to see a company just go, you know what, fine, we'll just work with your competitors and show you what should have been done. Because Apple could have just worked with Masimo, paid a licensing fee, and been done with it. Instead, they tried to fight in court, and they lost. Now, this new technology is not happening because it's like them wanting to set the terms for how it's used. It's just stopping patent infringement from happening in the future. So they're working with Qualcomm and Google to build blood oxygen measurements directly into the Wear OS platform. So if that ensures accuracy is really good, their tech is already FDA cleared. So just putting that technology into another provider will work very well. And this blood oxygen data could then be used for things like sleep apnea and just other stuff like that. So every OEM that goes through them, there will be a verification and validation to see if the implementation is good enough, and it will very possibly speed up FDA clearance by going through this company. Now, Apple Watches in the US won't have blood oxygen monitoring until the dispute is resolved or the patent itself runs out in 2028. Wear OS watches, however, could have them in the next 2 years. So it's very interesting to see where this could go. And Masimo is also working on its own Wear OS smartwatch called Freedom that it showed off earlier this year. So just to break this down, this company has sued Apple for infringing on their patent, blocked Apple from using the technology that is actually in the watch, and then gone to Wear OS with Google and Qualcomm and said, hey, we want to build this with you so that you can use it in your platform. That, to me, is like a 4 or 5 step ladder where they've just gone, fine, we're not being paid, to not only are we going to get paid, but we're going to regulate how it's used. So Apple is shooting themselves in the foot unless they just agree to license the tech, because they've been found that there is a high likelihood that they are infringing, hence why there is a hold on them using that technology. So it'll be interesting to see if the devices come out and when they will, but for now, this is all we really know. Now, let's go on to a gaming topic, and unfortunately, just like last time, this is a negative. Nintendo is suing Palworld, and it hinges on the Pokeball patent, apparently. Now, this is uh this is interesting. Um, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not entirely certain where the lawsuit has been filed. Um, it could be filed in the US, but it may be filed. No, it's been filed in Japan in the Tokyo District Court against Pocketpair. So it's actually in Japan. So any US or UK based patent law does not hold an effect there. So if you think you know it, just bear in mind you're not dealing with US or UK patent law. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. But basically, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company have joined forces to sue Pocketpair, the company behind Palworld. Basically, Pocketpair has issued a statement saying it's unaware of any patents violated. However, that doesn't necessarily mean there are no patents violated. We don't know. It's not like you're going to come out in the first thing you say and admit to doing it. Now, of course, ever since it was first created, Palworld has been continually compared to Pokemon for being a asset flip. So where they would kind of take the assets from Pokemon, change them a little bit, adapt it, and then put them back on. Obviously, again, unproven. Could it be? Yes, but you also have to remember that Pokemon kind of has a sort of history of being compared to as that. Don't know if it's true, but it's happened. And Palworld has stated they have no idea why it's happening, but they are going to be taking a look. But they're not going over. They're not being sued because their devices look similar. They're doing it because apparently it's patents on how the game itself works. That's what I understand it to be. So when I look at it, there's a patent owned by the Pokemon Company and Nintendo where they filed a patent this summer actually after Palworld was released for basically the Pokeball catching mechanic that you see in basically every Pokemon game. And they only actually patented it this year, and they were granted basically a fast track. Now, this patent could be why it's happening, but this patent was also filed onto a pre-existing parent patent filed by Nintendo and the Pokemon Company in December 2021, which is the only reason it can be used in this battle with Palworld. And don't get me wrong, Palworld has tailed off, but it's still massive, and it just Pocketpair are saying they intend to fight it. They're in Nintendo, where traditionally an era where Nintendo has been very strong in Japan. There won't be an immediate impact in that court on operations in the US or outside of the world, so anything that happens will be kept in the US. But Nintendo can always bring those fights over to the US, over to the UK, and get Palworld shut down if it goes well in Tokyo first. Maybe they'll test the waters in their home country where they might have an advantage, see how it goes, and then make a decision. That is everything for today's episode. Thank you for listening, and I will see you again in a couple more days.